Let's start Psalm 51 today. You're, if you've studied David's life, you know that Psalm 51 represents a watershed moment in his life. There's so much about David to be admired and emulated. He was called a man after God's own heart. Wow, would I like to have that on my tombstone? And not because people thought, that's a nice thing, but because it was very true. He was unbelievably courageous. I mean, as a boy, we don't know quite what his age is. I think it's safe to say he was an adolescent. He, with a slingshot, took on the mightiest Philistine warrior, Goliath. He killed him, cut off his head, and a huge military victory began for all of Israel at that point. And his exploits extended to the point where, when he returned from battle, the young women sang, "Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands." And oh, by the way, it didn't sit well with Saul. That was the beginning of the end of the relationship between Saul and David. David was an artist. He was a musician. He played his harp as like background music for Saul when Saul had episodes. We would probably call it something different today, but the Old Testament, the books of Samuel and First and Second Samuel, the writers call it a dark and evil spirit would come over him. David would play his harp, and the tension seemed to release, except for that time when Saul grabbed his spear and threw it at him, hoping to pin him to the wall. But he missed. Well, anyway, David was on the run for years, and yet courageous. He was a wise and careful leader, actually, for most all of his reign, which lasted right up until before his death. He was not a good family man. You can't have dozens of wives and many dozens of children, and, well, he didn't have a dozen wives, but he had more than he needed. And he had many sons and daughters. You can't keep up with that many kids. And came back and bit him on the backside. But anyway, most of David's life, I think, is a positive and powerful example for us of how to pursue God. But there was that one time in the spring when kings go off to war. David stayed home. He was tired, or he I don't know, but he stayed home. And in the cool of the early evening, he was on the roof of the palace in the city of David, and looked out and saw a very beautiful woman bathing. Well, to see the woman, I mean, you I don't know that he was looking for her, but he saw her, and it wasn't that first look that got him, it was the returning. There's a lesson in that. But He sent for her. He had sex with her. Oops, she becomes pregnant. Well, you know the story. he is, because he's not stupid. He's covering his tracks. He doesn't exactly murder Bathsheba's husband, but he sends him into the battle where he knew he would perish. A friend of mine recently went to Israel with his church on a tour. And they went to the city of David. And he said, when you're up in the city of David, you're looking down on everything. David could, being on the roof of his palace, he had full view of virtually the whole city. It was, how could he miss Bathsheba? And going back to it, I don't think Bathsheba was necessarily trying to be seductive. And to bathe on the roof, well, I don't think that would have been totally out of the ordinary. It would have been cooler than inside the house. And yet, when David sent for her as a submissive subject, she went. But I don't think, just me, I don't think it was a rape. Well, David covered his tracks. And Debbie and I travel to Amman, Jordan, 2-3 times a year. And it's been a while, but at the very top, it's called the Citadel, is where that military action took place. And you can see he didn't stand a chance. Well, okay. David hides it until Nathan, the prophet, exposes it. The telling words. He tells a story about a rich man who takes the lamb of a poor man and butchers it for a feast. And this, for David, the shepherd king, who, although he was hiding his own sin, had a very strong sense of justice. Well, funny how that works. I can have a really strong sense of justice and withhold it or suspend it with regard to me and my sin, my wrongful actions. Well, okay. David is outraged, says that man should die. And Nathan says, in the King James Version, thou art the man. You're him. David is gripped with grief. And I don't mean nudged. I mean by the throat. And Psalm 51 is his prayer. Here's how it goes. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. Now, that would be a great prayer for any follower of Jesus, any God lover, any Israelite, any Christian. Have mercy on me, O God. See, David understood the only thing standing between him and the dire consequences of his sin was God's mercy. Now, my favorite theme in the whole Bible is grace. And connected to grace, you've got mercy. But there's a subtle difference between grace and mercy. Grace is being given what I could never deserve. Mercy is not getting what I do deserve. David is crying out to God, please, God, in mercy, don't give me what my sin deserves. You know, that's a prayer. You know anybody that doesn't need to pray that prayer? I don't. I'll begin with myself. Daily, I need to pray that prayer. Have mercy on me, O God. Not because I deserve it. When things come into the realm of deserving, mercy is excluded. Because me getting what I deserve is justice. And if I've done well, the consequence should be positive. If I've done badly, the consequence should be negative. But when you invoke mercy, you are eliminating justice. I mean, think about it. What David deserved for his adultery, he already had, I don't know, 2 or 3 wives. And you can be certain they were not homely. It wasn't about, well, you know, she's just not, I don't think so. Well, have mercy on me, O God. There was a publican, tax collector, pretty much one of the at least top 10 most despised men in all Israel. Jesus tells a story. This publican, this tax gatherer, tax collector, and a Pharisee went to the temple to pray one day. The Pharisee, you remember the story, he said, God, I'm so thankful I'm not like these other people. My paraphrase is those people. Probably encountered those people, haven't you? And he goes on to give a slice of his spiritual pedigree. He tithes. He is a righteous man. And then there's the publican who beats his breast and says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. When you cry out to God for mercy, the outstanding feature in that moment, at least, is your humility. Proud people don't ever ask for mercy. Proud people generally are going to maneuver and manipulate things so that they don't ever need mercy. This, have mercy on me, O God, this phrase is a phrase of humility. There's so much in that one phrase, and I'm afraid I could get all locked up in it, but there's not time for that. I'll just leave this for the challenge. It would be a good idea for every single one of us to begin our day and end our day with this same prayer. Have mercy on me, O God. Simply to remind ourselves, it's not about how good I am. It's about how big His love is and how unbelievably infinite His mercy is. You can't say that prayer and it mean anything without humility of heart. Well, okay. That's it for today. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.